Hi, everyone. 2.5 years ago, Remy Berthaud and I had the idea to create a conference dedicated to open source businesses. We're now preparing for the third edition of Open Source Founders Summit and started this video series to showcase the kinds of conversations between leadership and open source companies that happen at the event. If you would like to be part of the conversation, you should join us May 18th and 19th in Paris. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Open Source Founders Summit video series. I'm Emily, your host, and I'm talking with Heili and Peter today. This is a video series to promote Open Source Founders Summit, which is happening this May 18th and 19th in Paris, and it is a gathering of leadership in open source companies. So first, if you could introduce yourself, Peter and Heili.
Okay, well, so my name is Peter Zaitsev. I am the founder of the company called Percona. We help people to run open source databases successfully, as well as, co-founder and angel investor in some of other open source related projects.
And hello, my name is Heili Tomme. I am the global head of engagement at a open source nonprofit organization called Mobility Data. We are stewards of open data standards within transportation, GTFS and GBFS, and we help the public agencies and transportation mobility companies speak with trip planning apps so that consumers and riders can see information about transit and where they're going around the world.
Excellent. So I want to start off with a relatively positive question. What do you both see as an opportunity that open source companies have, or open source nonprofits, that other companies don't?
I can start.
Okay, go ahead.
One big opportunity that I've really learned after joining the open source community just over 2 years ago is that with open source, you have a foundational layer of trust and transparency, which allows you to build a really strong foundation, whether you're working with the public sector or the private sector. It's a nice baseline, and we can grow upon that. So there's this level of trust and ability to see how you're building and scaling your business or your offerings. So that's one thing I believe that open source provides, and that we are operating at the intersection of community, infrastructure, and also economic value.
And Peter, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I think this opportunity was with open source for a long time, and that remains. And this is like a fundamental difference of what the open source companies, open source projects, they give people a lot of stuff, and there is much more desire of those people to give something in return and master, right? And I think even if all this, concerns people blaming especially big corporations as free riders and so on and so forth, when it comes to a lot of end users of open source software, they want to give back, right? And that can be, code contribution, promotion, right? And other things which fundamentally come from a goodwill.
Mm-hmm. How do you think that something like goodwill translates into revenue?
Well, I mean, in from my point of view, that really greases a lot of the go-to-market side, right? That happens from like a very, top of the funnel, like you get people, referring the other users to use the software or recommending them to become the customers, as well as later down the process when, let's say, the company leadership looks at the software, they can have a lot of very loyal supporters inside of an organization which will help them through buyers decisions, which would require a lot of golf tournaments and steak houses, right, if it's reached another way.
What do you think, Haley? How do you use this something like trust or goodwill that people talk about in open source? How does that translate into revenue?
I mean, this is the question that, I think I'm really excited about when coming to the Open Source Founder Summits to discuss with others, because I think there's no one right answer, and that's something that is unique and different between organizations. For us, the goodwill aspect really, as Peter said, brings people into the community. It allows them to dip their toes in and to understand and explore what open source can do for their business. And 9 times out of the 10, people start to understand the real value. And that's where you can see, okay, well, you can join the community, you can contribute and, build upon open source at no cost. However, there's that misconception that it's just free indefinitely. And that's where we really need to do the work, so that people understand, people like me and our whole team at Mobility Data, we don't work for free. And so we need to balance that great, goodwill contribution from really smart minds and diverse perspectives from around the world. And then, like you mentioned, Peter, showing it to leadership and making sure that then also there can be some investment that comes with that goodwill so that we can continue to do the work and grow it globally in the right way with great governance.
So I've made this argument before that open source can speed up your marketing funnel, or grease your marketing funnel at every stage. I'm curious, Peter, you mentioned this a little bit as well. Can you give any more examples of how it can open source can make your marketing funnel work better?
Yeah, well, I think we mentioned in terms of more common desire of people to refer other people, right, and support adoption of a project throughout organization, right, for selfish reasons, right, and then you often have a software is just used in the organization and becoming commercial. Customers become sort of not even kind of technical, just like a policy decision saying, hey, we are already using this stuff, right? We need to make sure we have the commercial decisions because, just grabbing some software off the internet, right, is not really what we can do, right? I think that is a very important part, right? Another thing I think with the open source software, it really allows for a lot of that exploration, like free exploration, right? Compared to other software saying, hey, give me your email, maybe give me your credit card number, right? So you can sign up for this free trial. And then our very nice salespeople are going to annoy hell out of you, right? Or not even salespeople, but probably some automating, spamming system, right, is going to do that, right? That is very unattractive, especially for a lot of developers. And if you're open source, like, hey, you know what, you can, just download the software from there, try it. If you don't want to engage with anyone, you're kind of completely invisible, right? And you can do that on your own schedule, right? With your own process, right? And then only engage if what you choose to engage. And I think that is a very, very empowering, right, for a lot of folks.
Peter, I think you're right in that, is that one thing that I find is one of the biggest benefits is that concept of buy before you try. So you don't have to start educating and promoting what your business is doing from ground zero. What we're doing is we're allowing people to try it, get involved at their own pace. And then that's where our team comes in, is specifically, the team that I lead at Mobility Data Engagement, to really help then connect the dots of how you can take your community and, development in participation, and then turn it into something larger and scalable to really help you move forward. So that concept of really buy before you try, it helps you to get from, 0 to 2 before you go in and try to potentially build greater partnerships.
Oh yeah, I like your buy before you try. That's kind of goes same as the open source coin that copy left to to sort of like a counter copyright, right?
Absolutely.
I also really like, Peter, that you talk about the human element of sales because people often forget that no matter the size of your deal, and no matter the size of the company you work for or the size of the company that you're selling to, sales is ultimately human. There is a human being at the other end of the sales deal that is signing a check, and that human being has interests for their company, obviously, but they also have individual interests, and ideally those are aligned with the you know we would like to imagine that those are always perfectly aligned with the interests of their company, but that's not always the case. And sometimes they have interests that aren't aligned or not aligned; they're just different. And I think it's important to recognize that when you talk about selling, whether it's in the terms of open source or any other in any other thing that you can sell.
Oh yeah, well, and like I think you're saying, they're perfectly aligned, right? I would say they never perfectly aligned, right? It's just a question of how much, misaligned they are.
Mhm.
Right? And I think we have, seen in, so many industries, right? I think that has been, spoken much more, right? Like for example, doctor prescribing some, medications because they're getting some, kickbacks, right? Was really well covered, right? I think a lot of that stuff expressed in our uh, industry as well. It just hasn't been spoken as much about, and I think that is one of the challenges of open source, right? Because with a lower monetization, which often kind of comes compared to purely proprietary software, there is no money for bribes. At least not as much money for bribes, right, of a different sorts as like a very expensive, proprietary software can offer.
How does this work for you, Haley? Because you work at a nonprofit organization. What's different? And let's think about this in a different way. What's different about a nonprofit organization that doesn't work in open source versus mobility data?
Sorry, what doesn't work in open source?
And so, what's different about between what you guys do and a nonprofit that it isn't working in open source? And does it change the
Yeah,
conversation
no,
that you're having with your
so
stakeholders?
yeah, I think I heard
No.
the question. So, yeah, I think
Do you want me to re-ask the
Yeah, I
question?
mean, for us, you know, nonprofit is kind of a business model, and the open source nature allows us to have a neutral voice within the ecosystem. And in specifically within transportation, you have the private sector and the public sector, as well as other actors who are trying to work together. And sometimes, there's big differences in how those two operate and in how they move forward. However, there is a shared common goal, and one thing that we can do within open source uh, in the transportation sector specifically is that we can be that neutral independent body that hears both sides and then provides a solution and a way to, for example, speak, the bus that's run by the agency within, I'm in Toronto, so in Toronto, and we want to speak to the Googles, the Apples, the transit, the city mappers of the world who are providing riders information of when the bus is coming. We're providing them a neutral, safe space to exchange data and be able to, at the end of the day, deliver what we want to the ecosystem, which is promoting using public transit and such. So I think that's a unique role that mobility data plays in the ecosystem, and one that we have heard over and over again that is very valuable. And so this is kind of what helps drive our work.
Okay, I have to ask this question. What do you think AI is changing in your respective organizations? Haley, do you want to start this time?
Oh wow, that is the $1 million question, and that is something that is something that often comes up, and one that we are very carefully navigating. So right now we are in a stage of speaking to a lot of our partners and stakeholders within the ecosystem to understand their perspectives. Because once again, as that neutral body in the middle, we don't take a stance one way or another. And so, what we feel our duty is right now with regards to AI is understanding the perspective of all the stakeholders that we work with. And then, once we have done so, we can support the ecosystem as we do now with the data exchange. So we're in infancy stage, but again, as a neutral body, we don't go one way or another at this time.
What about you, Peter?
Yeah, well, I think the impact of AI to open source is really going to be dramatic, right? And in which way? If you think about the open source, especially from open source from developer standpoint, right? It's always has been sort of this very elitist ecosystem. Because if you think about writing code is very uncommon skill if you think about 8 billion or whatever people on the planet, right? And now what AI empowers is 10x more, 100x more people to become the builders, right? Let me use kind of that word to contrast to that, like old fashioned developers which are writing code, right? And I think that really empowers so many people to contribute more to the open source who have not been able to do that before. And I think also it multiplies that because you can do so much with AI in a bite-sized chunks, right? For example, if somebody can say, well, do I want to contribute a month of my work to open source, for absolutely for free, not expecting anything in return? Maybe not, but probably you would do that with a day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or something like that. And you can do amazing stuff with AI in a day those days, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would expect what we will have a lot more areas which
Mm-hmm.
are covered by open source software, which wasn't before, right? For example, I was often saying, hey guys, you know what? I'm not surprised there is no good open source software for dentist workflow automation because dentists typically do not write open source code and open source engineers are not excited about the dentistry, right? But you know what? Now with AI, dentists can write code, right? Well, not write code, but use AI to create a software for themselves, right? And can share that as an open source, right? And I think that is, like a truly transformational opportunity.
I
So I'm
completely agree, Peter. That's really interesting. But I have a question for you, because that example really illuminated, I guess, that barrier that comes down on bringing more people into the community. If you're not a developer, right? If you're not technical in nature, so curious as to how you see quality, and going through that kind of QA process of, let's say inviting more people in that aren't, within that developer world or in the technical world. How do you approach quality to ensure that it's the right contribution? And I guess there's no right or wrong answer, but you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
look, I think this is, oh
I
yes.
want I want to interrupt because I had to do a quick Google search. OpenMolar is an open source GPL3 dental practice management software. Was started by a UK dentist, Neil Wallace. Let's see, there was a second one as well. Quality software for dental offices, open dental software. This one I don't see, it's not as clear if it's open source or if it's just called open source, or if it's just called open. At any rate, it's not out of the question that there is a open source dental
Okay. Well, yeah.
software.
Very. It probably is right, like in this case. But anyway, I'm using that as example, right, like in this case. But I think it's kind of good to understand if open source, right, is what there is a lot of half-baked stuff, right, on the GitHub, right. I think it's important also to understand then what is open source software, right, and then which is open source usable software, right.
Mhm.
That is a kind of a very difference, right, because I think majority open source project you find on GitHub when people start with an idea, right, and then it's kind of never quite finished, right? But again, I may be wrong, right? It's totally possible what dentists are already, progressed to that side, but there are, I think, other areas of unfulfilled opportunities for open source.
So,
Well,
Peter, hopefully we encounter a founder from an open source dental clinic in Paris in a month.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna write him.
But
I'm
yeah.
gonna write him an email. This, the guy.
Yes, yes, yeah. We were talking about like an open source dentist software for dentists doesn't exist, and it looks like you exist, right? Hey,
Yep.
do you? But look, I mean, I want to like to answer a question about the quality, right? I think that is a question, right, which I think is going to be, solved in a gradual way. As usually when some transformation happens, right, it's kind of, really puts a lot of stress on the system, right? You'll say like, oh my gosh, now we can have this AI system to go and create a lot of bugs and master, right? But we don't have the same AI system kind of to run, which will also kind of fix them and ensure fix a quality, right? And say, oh my gosh, what is going on? But that's will going to be kind of settled one way or another. And I think what you also need to recognize, I think two things is one is a lot of open source software which you use already is absolute crap, even if it's written by humans, right? A lot of websites, even for a lot of very successful organizations like Make Me Cry, it's like, oh my gosh, how can you do proper form validation, right? Or, a lot of things are just such a stupidly bizarre, right? So, right. So I think that is, in many cases, AI over time will be able to do a better job, right? And then also, not all the software needs to have the same level of quality, right? Like for a lot of applications you use in every day, some games, if they crash, well, who cares, right? Compared to, I don't know, let's say the plain after pilot, right, which we want to be kind of quite reliable, right? And I think the use of AI will be different in different places, right? So, for example, when a database, my world, right, I think we still operate mostly in, AI can write the code, but people should validate it. Where,
Right.
in some cases, people are saying, hey, we can just white code the database, the white code the application, and it's good enough for a purpose, right? We don't know how it works, and frankly, we don't care.
So this is all great, but our time is up. So we're going to have to continue the conversation in May. So for those of you listening or watching, join us May 18th and 19th in Paris, and I'll see both of you then.
Yes. Thank you,
Thank you.
Emily.
See you soon.
Yeah, see you soon.